What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I came to a revelation yesterday that I think you guys should know about. This is not a vlog. Intro. So yesterday I was having a conversation with my wife. I've been pondering over this certain topic for a long time and never really had a good answer for it until yesterday. That topic being learning to hear God's voice or talking to God. Anytime this would come up in conversation, I really wouldn't have an answer. Like, how do you hear God's voice? Or you actually can have conversations with God? How do you even go about doing something like that? Normally, whenever that topic comes up, I don't have anything to say. I'm at a loss for words because I know how he sounds to me. I know what he talks like. I've talked to God for long enough that I actually know what he sounds like. I can distinguish him from other voices, such as my own head or something else. I know what God sounds like, but I wanted to have a reason and perhaps a method of being able to communicate with God clearly for people that either are not believers or are believers, but they're new and they just don't know how to go about it. Because my wife has struggled with this as well. She struggled with being able to tell the difference between herself, God, and other entities that could be communicating with you. I did a little digging beforehand in order to see what other content was out there pertaining to this. And let me tell you, there ain't much. There are a lot of people out there that give advice on this topic, but they're not very comprehensive. And hey, if you do this, you'll get to this. Like an A plus B equals C type of thing. There's not many people that do that. But my background in paranormal investigation really made me kind of question, there's got to be an actual comprehensive way to communicate with God. Like to show people that it actually works. Like, oh hey, this is actually a viable thing. I can do this. I can follow these couple steps and actually hear from God. Like that'd be cool. So I was like, I paranormal investigate. I communicate to spirits already. I should be able to do this or come up with a way to talk to God. For the people who are wondering. The list. First thing, the title for part 1 is Learning God's Voice. God spoke to me very clearly on this specific point, and he said, how do you know the difference between your wife speaking and just any old random woman on the street? And I was like, I don't know. I guess because I've been around her a lot. He was like, exactly. That is the first key to communication. That is understanding somebody's voice, like how they sound, what they're like, who they are as a person type of thing. Understanding the person you're talking to is a huge part of communication. God said that's the first thing that people need to learn when learning how to communicate with me. So what does that mean? That means going to where you can hear God speaking in past conversations, like with other people. And where do we find most of these conversations? The Bible. So the first step in learning how to communicate with God is to read the Bible. And when I say read the Bible, I mean doing it consistently, which means going once a day and spending some time actually reading what the Bible says and poring over the verses. Even if you don't understand it, trying to understand it is the key to that. I'd say roughly 6 to 12 months. You'll learn how God speaks. You'll understand how and why he does what he does and his character, because learning somebody's character really helps you to build a deeper relationship with someone. Thus, communication can continue. So that's step 1. Step number 2. Step number 2's title is pray often. Prayer has a very big misconception that it's all like this, where you go into like a church and you're sitting there in the pew and you're just like praying, basically treating God like a genie, like, hey God, give me $100 so I can pay for my television bill. Or, hey God, can you make sure that Susie down the street likes me, or some stuff like that. People have this misconception that prayer is more of a, oh hey, I'm just asking you and just talking at you, as opposed to having an actual conversation. Because all prayer really is just having a conversation with God. And conversations aren't just one-sided. There's this back and forth that always happens in a conversation with whoever you're talking to. There's always a back and forth. You're not just communicating strictly and just talking at someone. And by praying consistently and constantly talking to God, as well as listening, which is super important in prayer, basically you got to tell your brain to shut up for a second so I can actually hear God's voice. And that'll make the communication field super clear. If you can say something to God and be completely quiet, like just like stop talking, quiet your brain and listen, that'll make the communication field so much clearer. Allowing God to speak to you. So first we have learning what God sounds like to other people and understanding his character and his voice and what his voice sounds like to others, and learning when to speak and also learning how to listen. Those 2 points are extremely important. Lastly, part number 3. The third step is to keep track of the forward momentum that you've built over this long period of time. It's also a gauge to teach you what you were hearing from God and what you were hearing from just like yourself or another spirit. And that is to journal. Journaling about your life, and specifically in this example, your prayer life, is super helpful. For example, you can do experiments with this step. The one I've used in my personal life is every single year at the end of the year, I ask God what the next year is going to have in store for me, for my family, for the world. I read the Bible and I wait for an answer from him. I also write down what he says so that next year I can go back and see if exactly what was said the year prior, that actually happened the next year. I can go back and see. You might have to start off doing that. You never know. But start off simple. Like, you don't have to go crazy about it. But journaling will allow you to see the results of what you actually prayed for, thus solidifying and increasing your faith in this, or building a new faith if you didn't have any before. Those are the steps that you would use to begin to communicate with God. And now I'm going to tell you the different ways that he communicates with people from some experience, but also from others' experiences. For example, some of the most notable ones would be flammable shrubbery, stones with writing on them, cryptic dreams, and genocide. But all jokes aside, there are different ways that God can communicate. And he's God, so he can kind of do whatever he wants. The most notable ones for me have been through the actual word. I'd say telepathy, almost, like thoughts that aren't really your own thoughts, kind of like an intrusive thought, but not entirely. Dreams are a big one, and also can be kind of scary. One that I wasn't expecting was that he would talk through my kids. And I think one of the best ways to explain God's way of communication is he's more of a show not tell type of person, like the strong silent type. He's not going to use the same speech that we do because he is a spiritual being. Spiritual beings don't communicate through words. Sometimes they can, but most of the time they don't. But all in all, he'll more than likely show you something as opposed to just telling you something. For example, me and Lauren's relationship. Whenever I first met Lauren, my wife, I was doing an investigation on the building that she lived in. While I was there, God spoke to me telepathically, or in my mind, and he said, "You're going to be with her." And that's all he said. I remember specifically, I laughed and I went, "Ha, no, I'm not." Because at the time I was single, I was living life, I was doing YouTube videos, hanging out, not wanting to be tied down to anybody, just doing my thing. I didn't really want to have a relationship. I didn't even want a girlfriend. But God spoke to me a couple words, and then throughout the last 4 years has shown me the evidence of that. Of, oh, hey, by the way, you're getting married now, you're having kids, you're living life. And I just think that's funny because he only said one thing. And I was like, there ain't no way I'm gonna actually be with this woman. But that is the way that he communicated with me. Very, very few words, show, but don't tell. And that's what I mean by that's how he normally communicates. He would rather show than tell. Probably because the point gets across clearer whenever you do that. And that's all I got for today. I'll see you in the next video. Stay blessed.